It's 1995, Las Vegas. Security staff at Caesar's Palace are locked inside a surveillance room, watching footage they can't explain. A man just walked off the floor with $25,000. The dealer swears he lost the bet, but there's no footage of a switch or any sleight of hand or evidence. They replay the tape again and again. Still nothing. That same month, casinos across the Strip report similar losses. Chips going missing, high rollers winning without a pattern. No suspects, no arrests. The tapes showed nothing unusual. Behind it all was one man, a former dealer who lived under a bridge, who lost everything in his first week in Vegas, and then found a way to take it all back. This is the story of Richard Marcus, the man who stole $30 million from the world's most secure casinos and walked away without ever being caught. It's the summer of 1975, and Richard Marcus has just stepped onto the Las Vegas Strip for the first time in his life. He's 17, from New Jersey, and he's carrying $20,000 in cash, money he's just won betting horses. For Richard, it's more money than he's ever seen, and in Vegas, that kind of cash can vanish in an instant. Richard books himself into the Riviera Hotel, and within days, his confidence and reckless betting transformed that initial $20,000 into nearly $100,000. But Richard isn't satisfied. He wants more. In a single night, luck turns against him. Every bet he places goes wrong, one after another, until his entire stack of chips is gone. By morning, he's desperate. He sells his Mustang convertible. Then he loses that money too, trying to win back what he's lost. The Riviera, once welcoming, now sees him as a liability. Security kicks him out onto the street, broke and humiliated. With nowhere else to go, Richard finds himself sleeping under a freeway bridge near Tropicana Avenue. Weeks pass, and he survives by begging strangers for change. One night, a fight breaks out, and Richard takes a bottle to the head. Bleeding, broke, and hungry, he hits rock bottom. Richard swears to himself he'll never be this powerless again. A few days later, he steals fresh clothes from a store, cleans himself up, and bluffs his way into a job dealing blackjack at the Four Queens Casino downtown. But dealing isn't the answer he's looking for. Each night, Richard watches gamblers win more money in minutes than he earns in a month. The frustration eats at him night after night, shift after shift. What Richard doesn't know yet is that someone at the casino has been watching him closely. One evening, after finishing his shift, Richard notices a man waiting near the casino's back door. He's well-dressed, calm, and confident. As Richard passes by, the man stops him. "I've watched you deal," the stranger says quietly. "You're smart, you're sharp, but you're wasting your time here." Richard asks cautiously, "Who are you?" The man smiles slightly. "Just call me Mr. C. If you want to make real money, meet me tomorrow." Richard hesitates, then nods. He doesn't realize it yet, but this single conversation will set in motion events that will lead him to become the greatest casino cheat in history, taking casinos for millions of dollars without ever being caught. Richard shows up the next night, just like Mr. C asked. They meet in a quiet diner off of Fremont Street. Mr. C is already there, seated in a corner booth, sipping black coffee. He gets straight to the point. "I work with a team," he says. "We beat casinos, quietly, no violence, no weapons, just precision. You in?" Richard doesn't ask for details. He says yes. A few nights later, Richard is back at his blackjack table. It's a normal shift until he sees one of Mr. C's men sitting at third base. The player acts casual, ordering drinks, making small talk, but Richard's told to watch his right hand. Midway through the game, the player places a small bet. He loses. No one reacts. Then comes the winning hand. The player leans forward, just slightly. That's the cue. Richard looks the other way. In a single motion, the player switches his small stack for a much larger one, 3 $500 chips hidden under a $25 chip. From a distance, it looks identical. The bet is paid out as if it were placed before the cards were dealt. The player pockets over $1,400 in profit, just like that. Richard's cut? Enough to pay rent, eat properly, and stop thinking about that bridge on Tropicana. He wants to understand the method. Mr. C teaches him the concept: late betting. It's simple in theory. Place the bet after the outcome is already known. But in practice, it takes perfect timing, tight teamwork, and the ability to blend in. The basic structure involves 3 people. Player 1 makes the first small bet and handles the chip switch. Player 2 steps in after the win and claims the payout as their own. The spotter gives the signal and watches for security. Richard starts off as Player 2. His job is to replace Player 1 after the switch, sit down quickly, and act like nothing happened. When the dealer looks up, he sees a new face with a large stack of chips, matching the bet just made. If the dealer gets confused or questions the payout, Richard reacts fast. "Hey, you paid me wrong." It's not aggressive, just enough pressure to make the dealer doubt himself. In a busy casino where hundreds of chips move every minute, most dealers won't risk arguing over one hand. The first time Richard runs it for real, it works cleanly. No alarms, no heat, just money. He's in. By the early 1980s, Richard Marcus has settled into the game. Late betting worked. The team pulled in thousands every week, but casinos were adapting. Spotters, tighter surveillance, more scrutiny from pit bosses. One mistake could end the whole operation. That's when Marcus and Mr. C made a decision. Stop working Vegas, for now. They shifted focus to Monte Carlo, London, and the Bahamas. The rules were similar, but the security wasn't as sharp. It bought them time and distance from heat. But by 1994, Richard was back in Vegas. This time he wasn't just a player. He was the architect. He wanted a new team, reliable people, operators who could pull off high-stakes plays without hesitation. That's when he reconnected with Mark Balls Abramowitz, an old friend and trusted gambler. Together, they brought in Pat Mallory, a charismatic high roller with nerves of steel. Pat could play drunk, flirt with the dealers, chat up pit bosses, while stealing 5 figures in plain sight. He didn't just blend in, he belonged. Within a few weeks of testing, they were ready. But Marcus didn't want to repeat the same scam. He needed something smarter, cleaner, safer. The idea came from a strip club. Marcus had been talking to a dancer named Savannah. At some point during the conversation, something clicked. He kept replaying their old switch routine in his head. The problem was obvious. Security cameras always watched the winners. So, what if they flipped the whole operation? What if, instead of switching in bigger chips after a win, they switched in smaller chips after a loss? Nobody watches the losers. That was the core idea behind the Savannah Move. The setup was simple. Player 1 places a bet with a stack of 3 chips. 2 high-value chips on the bottom, 1 low-value chip on top. The low chip is nudged slightly closer to the dealer's line of sight. That way, when the bet loses, the dealer only registers the cheap one. As the chips are raked in, Player 1 reaches forward, acting clumsy or drunk, and quickly swaps the stack with 3 low-value chips. If the dealer notices anything, the player apologizes and backs off. No damage. But if the dealer doesn't notice, the loss just became worthless, and the high-value chips are quietly pocketed. If the bet wins, there's no switch at all, and the real payout goes through. No red flags, no arguments, no claims of "you paid me wrong," just smooth execution. It was faster, quieter, and when the security reviewed footage, they were looking for the wrong thing entirely. Players switching in big chips after a win, not small chips after a loss. It was, in Marcus's words, the cleanest scam we ever ran. The Savannah Move worked better than expected. After months of running the play at mid-tier casinos, Marcus was ready to scale up. The team had practiced enough. Their timing was sharp. Their confidence was higher than ever. It was time to hit Caesar's Palace. One of the most watched casinos, most heavily staffed gambling floors on the Vegas Strip. But to Marcus, that meant bigger stacks, faster action, and more distracted dealers. They walked in as a group: Marcus, Abramowitz, and Pat Mallory. They weren't subtle. Pat wore a high-end suit, staggered slightly, like he had had one drink too many. Marcus took his place at the back, watching the table flow. Abramowitz stood to the side, playing the role of a casual observer. The target was roulette. Easier to work, constant chip movement, and the layout allowed for quick sleight of hand. Pat bought in with $5,000 chips. That alone drew attention. The dealer watched closely as Pat placed his stack, 2 high-value chips hidden under a $25 chip, just like they'd practiced. The ball spun, Pat leaned in. The wheel stopped. The bet lost. Pat slurred something under his breath and reached forward, swiping the losing stack and replacing it with 3 low-value chips. Smooth, unnoticed. Then came the pressure release. He stood up and walked off toward the bar. The dealer said nothing. That night, they repeated the move across multiple tables. By the end of the session, they were up over $100,000, all from clean wins from losing bets. Back at the hotel, they agreed they'd gone too hard. The stakes had been too high, the exposure too risky. Caesars had cameras everywhere. All it would take was one sharp-eyed pit boss or a second look at the footage. So, they adjusted. Over the next 6 months, the team scaled their bets down. Smaller stacks, shorter sessions, quieter exits. Still, the money added up fast. Hundreds of thousands stolen from Vegas casinos. No one caught, no charges filed. But, as always, things don't stay quiet for long. It was a routine night at Bally's. The team had just run the Savannah Move twice already. Both clean, both profitable. But during the third attempt, something went wrong. Pat Mallory was mid-play. He placed his bet, watched the ball spin, and saw it land outside his number. The loss was expected, part of the setup. He reached forward to make the switch, same motion as always. But this time, the pit boss was watching. Noticed the stack, noticed the hand, noticed just enough to raise suspicion. The pit boss walked in fast. No questions, just a hand on Pat's shoulder. What was that? Pat didn't panic. He stayed in character. Drunk, confused, smiling like he didn't know where he was. The pit boss didn't buy it. He called for backup over the radio. Within seconds, 2 more staff joined the table. The dealer stepped back. Players stopped betting. Marcus and Abramowitz watched from the far end. They couldn't help him now. Pat leaned in. Quietly, he whispered something to the pit boss, then asked to use the restroom. Reluctantly, they let him go. He didn't waste a second. Inside the bathroom, Pat locked the stall, pulled off his suit jacket and slacks, and revealed a second outfit underneath. Plain clothes, no trace of a high roller. It was an emergency trick they'd practiced weeks earlier. He stuffed the outer layer into a trash bag, slipped out the side exit, and vanished into the night. Meanwhile, the pit boss returned to the roulette table, looking for a man in a suit who no longer existed. They reviewed the cameras, rewound the footage, zoomed in. But without the player, without the chips, there was nothing concrete. The casino had no name or evidence, and thus, no arrest. That night, the team narrowly escaped what should have been their first takedown. They knew it was only a matter of time before casinos started catching on, so they changed course. Again. By the end of '95, the game had changed. Cameras weren't just above the tables anymore. They were everywhere, embedded in walls, tracking angles, flagging patterns. The old plays weren't enough. So Marcus changed the plan. They started scouting casinos weeks in advance, not to watch the dealers, but watching the people watching the dealers. They'd sit for hours near roulette tables without placing a single bet, logging the floor manager's habits, which pit boss walked away too often, which tables had the weakest camera angles, which dealers froze under pressure. Then they brought in something new, a system of coded signals built entirely around dealer behavior. One dealer spun fast, another took longer to call bets, One had a habit of looking away every time a cocktail waitress passed by. They recorded practice runs in hotel rooms, filmed each other from across the room, watched the footage frame by frame. If something felt off, even by half a second, they scrapped it. By the time they hit Caesars again, nothing was improvised. The movement, the cover, the switch, it all looked natural, because it had been rehearsed to the frame. The team was running the invisible switch almost nightly. Casinos were losing hundreds of thousands of dollars every month, but no one knew how. Marcus, Abramowitz, and Mallory moved from Caesars to Mirage, from Bally's to Bellagio, always rotating, always subtle. They kept the stakes moderate, enough to cash out big, but not enough to trigger floor-wide panic. It worked. In 4 months, they cleared over $3 million. No flags, no heat, not even suspicion. Casino security was scrambling. Hours of surveillance footage showed nothing unusual. They were looking for the wrong scam. They expected sleight of hand after a win. They never thought to check the losing hands. That was the genius of it. One night at Caesars, a pit boss flagged Marcus after noticing an unusual pattern. He was always playing big, always calm, and somehow never losing too much. The floor staff pulled him into a back room. They asked questions, searched his pockets, reviewed footage right in front of him. But Marcus had done nothing wrong, nothing they could prove. The footage showed a man placing a bet, the ball spinning, the stack disappearing. No win and no payout. To surveillance, it looked just like another loss. After hours of review, the pit boss walked back into the room. "You're free to go," he said, "but we don't want to see you here again." Marcus didn't argue. He walked out calmly, his pulse steady. On the inside, he was laughing. Because that night, he didn't make a switch. He didn't have to. He'd bet low, lost small, walked away clean. They were being watched now, and the best move was to do nothing. The surveillance arms race wasn't slowing down. Casinos were investing millions into new camera systems, facial recognition, and pattern tracking systems. They were profiling how players moved, when they bet, and who stood nearby. But by then, it didn't matter. Marcus and his crew had already taken the money and changed the model. They stopped chasing quick hits. No more heat, no more casino hopping. Instead, they turned the invisible switch into a long-term system. One casino, low volume, small daily wins, quiet exits. They blended in. To the staff, they were regulars, guys who won sometimes, lost often, and never made a scene. Behind the scenes, they were pulling thousands of dollars per week, cleanly, and no one noticed. By the late 90s, Marcus estimated they had stolen around $30 million across a dozen casinos worldwide. They ran the scam for 5 more years, refining the execution, training new partners, and rotating the plays just enough to stay ahead. Eventually, Marcus stepped back because he had made enough. And then he left the game on his terms, quietly. But a few years later, Marcus chose another path. Instead of stealing from casinos, he started advising them. The man who built scams that fooled every major casino in Vegas was now being flown in to teach security teams how to stop people like him. He trained dealers, pit bosses, and executives, broke down footage, walked through every switch, every misdirection, every blind spot they never noticed. Casinos paid him 6 figures per session. He even published a book, American Roulette, a full breakdown of his 25-year run. Marcus had lived both sides of the casino world. First as the invisible thief, then as the consultant brought in to catch the next one. And in his own words, he never got caught. He walked away clean.